Okay, hello and welcome. My name is James Novak, and this is my senior honors project for spring 2020. My project is the historic aspect of the mystique of Mississippi steamboats, the technological, social, and aesthetics. I've been mentored by Jacques Bergdorf, or Dr. Bergdorf, and he's been able to help me get through this for the past year or so and push me farther than I ever thought I'd be able to do alone. So let's begin. Introduction. So when you think of the words steamboats, steamboat era, and Mississippi River Valley, what does this bring to mind? Some might think of a literal definition of steamboats and just think of them as machine, but it's almost impossible to separate it from the American identity and history that it has. Just like the cowboy and the horse, the engineer and the train, or maybe the American industrialist in New York or Chicago in the early 20s. It's essentially impossible to not know or connect with this mystique of an era long past. It brings people in consistently enough that there is media always being generated as a result of this historic interest or intrigue. My project will argue that the steamboat mystique that I just talked about is defined by the cultural responses that are relevant to a modern understanding. So, by these media sources, they therefore help me define its definition and its realism, or its reality rather. But what is a steamboat for those that aren't really knowledgeable on the subject? It's a water transportation method and machine that was built off of several patents that was used on the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, and across the ocean. But its home and its peak would be during the 1850s in the Mississippi River, essentially completely terraforming the economic, social, and physical landscape of the Mississippi River Valley. It would be a source of luxury, trade, and travel for all those who partook in its reality. It's part of the several myths of America, not in the way that it isn't true, but it constantly pulls us back and has our imagination slowly go and drift, imagining what was, what could be, or just its minor aspects. It's constantly pulling us back in with its mystique. So, one of the few blessings of this paper, in the fact that I'm looking at media, is that there's just so much. I could make an entire paper based off of just one kind of source, but I do have limited time, and the paper wouldn't be as strong if I didn't make a full, all-encompassing list. But I do encourage you to explore. The next few slides are going to be talking about some of the essentially honorable mentions that didn't make it into a full explanation in the paper, but do show the breadth of what is out there. So a resort, a silver coin, part of a tabletop RPG, a puzzle, a board game, a river cruise, or the historic photographs that exist of it. I have some textual examples here, some musical ones, or some non-essential visual ones as well. So my process has been about a full year of research and efforts with only a winter break in between. Essentially, the first part was gathering secondary sources and understanding what is out there for scholarly and academic works, and second was applying that into an argumentative and reasonable position with context. So this mystique that I have loosely defined is tangible in three deliberate subject headers: technology, the social aspects, and the aesthetic aspects of the steamboat. And because I have so many sources available to me, I will be deliberately applying a textual, musical, and visual to each. While I don't have time to cover them all, the accompanying paper to this project does go into full depth, basically applying this three-pronged structure to each. So a textual, musical, visual, in that order for each, just for the tech, the social, and the aesthetic. And to wrap each of these up, while initially unintentional as I am an art minor, I am kind of now a source. I will now be applying my own graphic creations to further my point, not only proving its definition by rounding it all together with what I've seen throughout my research, but also proving its validity in the way that I can interact with it now and that it exists, that it can still be worked into. So, technology. This is my first subject. What is a steamboat if it's not a technological work? It's very literal. It's the most recognizable aspect of the steamboat, and it's almost inseparable of the historical frontier developing context of the Mississippi River. It completely changed and terraformed the landscape, going from coastal schooners and raft boats and other forms of development and transport to a powerful ingenuity-based way of travel. It's not just a vehicle; it's something that has completely changed history, and because of its ability and power, it has become a linchpin and a exact defining moment of that era. My choices for this section of the paper are the textual source Murnane in the Illinois, Mississippi Queen the Song, and the artwork Paddle Steamer by Jan Borta. So, Murnane in the Illinois by Willis Gibson was originally published in McClure's Magazine 21 back in 1903, but it's also found in the Mississippi River Tales collection, in which I will be citing from. Our story covers Captain Murnane in a steamboat versus Captain Redford, a old, busted-up steamboat versus the brand-new, hoity-toity, posh steamboat of the new era. It's a steamboat race, a real historical thing that occurred and was experienced by passengers and visitors and the audience. But now it has even more deliberation onto the technological flair in the story. It's about ingenuity, power, craft, tact, steam pistons, propulsion, curving, speed. It's a strong proof in its language and focus on the raw power of the steamboat. It's both a story element and a focus of tension, thus proving its importance to the identity of the steamboat with an entire story focused on its aspects. And it's very tangible, real, and exciting even. And in result, I have created Riverbound Strength. Utilizing what I've seen, I've been able to create my own primary source as a for the technology aspect of the steamboat. It's a steamboat with a lot of might, a deliberate angle from the vessel, creating a lot of power, energy, velocity, and with its paddle wheel and smoke, it truly dominates the landscape in reference to the smaller gentleman on the side. It deliberately is like a display of power and might and size to show how truly alien the technology was to the time, and how powerful and exquisite it was. Next, we have the social aspect. The riverboat gamblers, dapper gentlefolk, and honest, hard-working rivermen make the world of the steamboat personal. The folk that live on the steamboat are just important as the boat itself. Life on a steamboat brought all forms of life under a niche environment. That's a quote from myself in my paper, because the travelers are just important as the boat itself. Literally, those people that live on it make it work. These interpretations, exaggerations, character stereotypes give a palpable personality, character, life and memory to what lives there, and helps us imagine the folk and the period that helped push the steamboat along or lived in relation to it. My sources are How Dodge Dodged the Cart Sharps, Showboat the Musical, and Giant Steamboats in the New Orleans, the oil painting. I'll be focusing on the 1951 musical Showboat. So it's based off the book of the same name, but now through this Hollywood lens that has choreography, a wonderful band, acting, and it's all put together in a great form of cinematography and old Hollywood era magic. It's a musical retelling the life, romantic hardship, and world of entertainment that existed from the steamboat. It has several numbers that elaborate on the romance, the fun, the majesty, and the overall just palpable fun that can exist with this era. It is a wonderful, colorful Hollywood reimagining, and it doesn't get any farther than showing. It doesn't get any better than showing the social aspects than a bright, colorful, mystique-filled film about this aspect of the steamboat. In response, I have created Lounge Room. It displays the three groups of what I would say are Steamboat Society, or the imagination of Steamboat Society. essentially the seedy riverboat gamblers in the front, the rich and the having of those in the background at the dance, in a dance, and those that are working in the background, trying their hardest and forced to be in a position on steamboats where they act as crew. The African Americans and the impoverished people that existed of the period. So it's a focus on something that's traditionally not given. While there are books and media that I cover in my paper that do exist on the subject, I rarely see an artistic subject that shows this. So it is both an artistic and historic subject, and it's kind of one of political intent, because in this respect I have the guiding lines and the vanishing point deliberately center on our African American figures and those in the background. It is both literal and representative in that respect. So it is both. It demonstrates the dichotomy in that, and I wanted to make sure that I could display that in my own way. Finally, we have aesthetics. Beauty has defined the river, then the history about it. It brings people back. It gives a vivid imagination, the natural fauna, the man-made intensity of Steamboat Gothic, and the emotion and nostalgia really brings a sort of reverence, and it demands our interpretation of this past. It's the most strongest and outward portion of the steamboat. While people might recognize that it's a device or a machine or a vehicle, it's almost impossible not to partake in its beauty or understand why it evokes such a provocative and powerful emotional response from people or anyone. My sources are the textual River Home, the musical Steamboat Willie, and the painting The Large Tugboat, or the visual The Large Tugboat. Ferdinand Ledger's The Large Tugboat is an analytical cubist painting with gouache, ink, watercolor, and several materials as our eyes dance back and forth. Its difficulty helps sells our imagination of it, and just shows how expansive, imaginative, and powerful the steamboat's aesthetic can be, because it shows just how conceptually large it could be. It's a modern take, even if it's from 1923. It's incredibly expansive and deeper than what the literal representations you would expect it to be. It helps us to understand that the steamboat era is more than just a very concrete thing, but the aesthetic beauty is interpretive and personal. And finally, my last graphite drawing is Nostalgia by Sunlight. Its purpose is to deliberately capture emotion, because we take a position as the viewer as well as the audience looking back, because we both witness the arcadey Victorian Steamboat Gothic details, but also the beauty of the river, and partake in its nostalgia as we longingly look off into the distance. It's deliberately dramatic in a way. It's illogical to look off into the sun, but it provides a literal message as we watch the steamboat era drop and disappear alongside the setting sun. It's a period that has gone past, and yet we consistently look back and try to either relive it, understand it, or interpret it. In closing, I have defined the steamboat Mystique by 3 topics, 3 source materials, and then a personal work for each. There are several research topics which I go into in my paper that are left open, including all the source materials that you could apply to a single paper. But the majesty of the steamboat era calls us back to the water and steams of our past. To watch the American Queen with its tall stacks spewing steam, to hear its calliope song, to see its decks lined with passengers eager to embark, and the bank of river lines with greeters, some in vintage clothing, is to experience for just a few hours what river towns long knew as a way of life. Steamboats came and steamboats went. The river was always a highway. This leaves further intrigue, because my paper covers these topics in full with explanation, citation, context. I cover topics like Steamboat Willie and Mississippi Queen, proper Chicago style, about 15 pages of text, so it's a reasonable size to get through, and we'll be accompanying this project. And this is where I say thank you, because I wouldn't have been able to do this alone, and only through the people that have been there forever or joined in later that I've been able to put this together. And I appreciate you all for working alongside me and working so hard. Specifically, my mentor, Dr. Bergtorf, because I wouldn't be able to be where I am now as a person through this project, or essentially through my history degree without him. And I am more than thankful for not only him but everyone here for what they've done for me. And I want to thank you specifically, not like you, the viewer, because you've gotten through this project alongside me. And if you are a honor student as well, I wish you the best in your future endeavors, and I thank you for taking part in mine. And I hope you all are well, and I hope you all have a good day. So thank you so much for taking part in this.